Welcome guys to another episode of Brough Guitars Review. We changed the setting up just a smidge, just to do something a little different. It's still, belligerently hot outside. So over here on this side of the house, I'm directly underneath two AC vents. So I won't look quite as shiny as I normally do. But today, as you saw with the opening footage, we are going to talk about a very, very particular guitar. But before I get into anything real quick, I'd just like to say I did see the Sammy Hagar Best of All Worlds tour, hence the show. Anyway, it was a great show. Took my daughter. It was her first rock concert, and her first rock concert got to be, basically the remnants of Van Halen. So it was a good time, definitely worth it. Highly suggest you go out and you go see that. So here we go into this bad boy right here. Okay. So in the realm of guitar, right? So there's all these super duper famous iconic guitars, some of which, are more identifiable than others. But we're talking anything from obviously Eddie Van Halen's Frankenstein to, Brian May's, red guitar. I can't remember the nickname of that. He built it with his father from a fireplace or whatever. You also have Jimi Hendrix's Strats that he hand painted. You got, Jimmy Page's, Les Paul. You got Zakk Wylde's Bullseye painted guitar. You got, Richie Sambora's Star guitar. You got, Van Halen's got to play with every toy. Hey, dude, can you play with that somewhere else? But you have, Buddy Guy's Polka Dot Star. You got the Polka Dot, Randy Rhoads guitar. Excuse me. You can go on and on. From Steve Vai's Jim to Joe Satriani's Chrome guitar to, John Mayer's Blackie. You can go to Stevie Ray Vaughan's, All Beat to Hell, number one wife guitar. I mean, there are tons of guitars that are identifiable to certain artists. And I will say that, for people that don't necessarily listen to music or they're not big on guitar players, there are definitely a few guitars that I would say really stick out to where, like, you may not necessarily address them with a particular artist or a particular, band, but you're like, hey, I've seen this guitar somewhere. And this is definitely one of them, okay? So this right here, this guitar, set this down. This is George Lynch's Tiger guitar. Okay, hey, let me get off that. So you have George Lynch's Tiger. That's what she looks like. Again, you'll get more close-ups of this and all that its beauty that it is. So we're talking about a time back in the 1980s is when George Lynch was really in his heyday. So in the 80s, it was all about, besides performance and this and that, image was everything back in the 80s. So if you had a way to stick out and be identifiable in a time where being a good guitarist was oversaturated, like, it's crazy to think, back in that time, like, how many fantastic guitar players that there were. I mean, so much, in fact, that it was hard to stick out because, everybody kind of had the same, influences guitar-wise. Like, everybody liked Clapton, Jimmy Page, Jimi Hendrix, Andy Timmons. The list goes on. And so all of those influences, you kind of start to notice all good guitar players kind of had their own style, but a lot of those people, those were their guitar god heroes, no different than our guitar god heroes today are the ones that kind of, influence us. So with that being said, image was everything in the 80s, everything was, animal print, pants, spandex, graphic guitars. You had, airbrush painted guitars. You had, stickers on everything. You had, bedazzled jewels, and it was a time of where you just decorated damn near everything. Even your denim. That was the 80s. And so George Lynch, if in case you didn't know who he happened to be or who he is, he's still alive today, very much alive and kicking and still rocking. But George Lynch, to me, because in the time and the era that he was, I don't think he necessarily gets the credit that he deserves. To me, he's similar to Reb Beach, not necessarily in playing style, but in the fact that I believe like those guys, like them, don't get enough credit because, again, it was so hard to stick out back in the 80s because it was like the time of the gunslinger of the West. It was all about how fast you played and, how much shredding you could do and melt people's faces off. Like, they were the wild pistols of the West. It was all about that, but it just came to guitar. And because it was so oversaturated and a lot of bands were influenced by each other and they all kind of started to kind of sound the same. That's kind of why I think the 80s rock kind of died off, is because it got so diluted, it started to sound the same. But all music kind of does that because it's all based on, influence. No different than disco started to sound the same. A lot of rap starts to sound the same. A lot of pop music started to sound the same. So, with that, George Lynch just didn't really get the credit that he deserved for being the kind of guitar player that he was, because he came in the time of, Eddie Van Halen, Randy Rhoads, Stevie Ray Vaughan, like I said, not Reb Beach, but, people who got a lot more publicity, and again, it's not to take away from them at all. But, I think a lot of it is just because their music that, George Lynch, Red Beach, these guys that they happen to play with, maybe just didn't have as much commercial success as the other bands. And therefore, because they didn't really get the due diligence that they deserved as musicians. So I am not a George Lynch aficionado. I love really kind of like oddball, looking guitars than the more, kind of flamboyant ones that really, stick out and this and that. But I was always a fan of George Lynch's Tiger guitar. I'd seen it before, didn't really necessarily associate it with him or with who he played with, but I just knew this guitar existed. I had seen it on the kind of similar print on the guitars, and I was like, man, that just screams badass to me, and I need to have that. So I'll kind of go, obviously, per usual, go more in detail, about the guitar. But first, let me kind of start off with George Lynch, who he is, give you a little backstory on him, and then we'll kind of give you the story as far as the Tiger and how it became to be and what other different renditions there are of this guitar. So when I worked back at Hard Rock Cafe, again, many years ago, Hollywood Boulevard, when I worked at that Hard Rock Cafe, I eventually moved, to Nevada, and I ended up working at the Paradise and Harmon location, because there was two Hard Rocks here in Vegas. There's one off Paradise and Harmon, which is over by where the Virgin Motel is now, because it used to be the Hard Rock Hotel. And then there's the Strip location, which is this 3-story behemoth that's literally down on the Strip. So when I worked at the Paradise and Harmon location, I remember coming across a George Lynch guitar that was always close to a section that I was in, because I was known as a rocker, which is kind of like your senior server. You come in first, you get cut last, you're supposed to make the most money, you get the most tables. Basically, you're the shit. So there was a guitar there that I believe is known as the Skull and Snakes guitar or something along those lines. Again, apologize, Halen's chewing his toy, so it might be loud for you. You're gonna hear crunching, but this is what it is, buddy. He's part of the family. He gets to do whatever he wants. Such a pain in the ass. But that guitar, I think it was the Skull and Snakes guitar, and it kind of looked like this. So that guitar, like I said, was over by the station where I was by, and I just happened to always see it. I wasn't a big fan of it, necessarily in how it looked, but that's how I kind of became familiar with George Lynch. I was a guitar, and then I remember when that cafe closed, I actually took the George Lynch display. Obviously, they took the guitar, but it was this big padded, super heavy display, and it said George Lynch on it. And I kept that for many years. I think I sold it, but that was the only reason why I knew who George Lynch was. Now, I had heard his music, and the music that he happened to play with is, back, this is way back. Hold on, let me take a look here, because my dog stepped on my iPad here. So this is back, like I said, in the 80s. So who he's known to play with is a band called Dokken, Dokken. And they were a big hair metal, band of, obviously, in that era. But that was who he was with back in 1981. Then, later in 89, he ended up forming Lynch Mob, which was another popular band that he put together. And then I think it was, correct me down in the comments, KXM, maybe. It's where he was playing with like the drummer from Korn and a couple other people, just kind of like a misfit of bandmates, and they put out a couple records. So anyway, that's basically who George Lynch was known to have played with. That's really him kind of in a nutshell, and then we're gonna go now into the Tiger guitars. So this is what here's some pictures of him playing the Tiger guitar, so you can see it from different angles, the coloring and this and that, and then we'll go into it. So George Lynch says that he built this guitar back in 1978 from basically a bunch of different parts. So now, back in the day, you think in 1978, not to always relate this to Van Halen, but Van Halen, that was the year that Van Halen debuted their first self-titled album, Van Halen, also known as Van Halen 1. So again, that was kind of around the time like it was cool to mess with your guitars and this and that. Now, correct me if I'm wrong in the comments. I'm not 100% certain on this, but if I recall, when he got the body and he got the neck, Eddie got his from Charvel, or Boogie Bodies, and Boogie Bodies supplied Charvel at the time, and he claims to have gotten his body and his neck also from Charvel. So it's pretty crazy how two super duper iconic guitars happen to come from kind of like the same area, the same way. So he had put this together, and the body is pure maple, and he claims that the real guitar is super heavy. This one is maple, and it is heavy as hell. I think his was like, I've seen interviews where he says his was 17 pounds, but more or less, I've also seen where it was actually, weighted to be 13 pounds. Either way, that is a backbreaker of a guitar. Now, the original neck that I think he had on it was a maple neck with a maple fretboard and had black dot inlays. And it had a different kind of paint scheme up here on the head. 1978, pure maple body. He had an all maple neck. It's really a very straightforward guitar. It's only got, one volume knob here, which happens to blend in with the stripe, but it's like a black dome kind of looking volume knob. The pickup that he put in it, he actually happened to help design, was Seymour Duncan, known as the Screamin' Demon pickup. Okay, it's got a all black, all original Floyd Rose right here with wood screws. The pickup is directly mounted to the body. And again, like I said, on the original one, it was all maple neck, all maple fretboard. It had a slightly different paint scheme. Now, who actually painted the original body was Herb Veach. Herb Veach was the guy that actually painted the body. Now, George had explained, because if you look here at the body, you will see, again, checking because the body was finished in nitrocellulose lacquer, okay? And that's what created all of those little cracks, okay? So I guess he was touring over in Europe at the time, and they happened to go to Iceland. Now, this is back before he had a guitar case, and I guess the guitar was just freshly painted, and he happened to store it in a blanket. Not even a guitar case, a friggin' blanket. And because the temperatures obviously are super duper cold there, it actually caused the paint to crack. Now, George was very upset apparently at that time, but then he grew to obviously like it, gave it a little patina, a little character, and it's a really cool look. So he's a big fan of it now. I love checking on guitars. I think checking looks really cool. For being a parts guitar, obviously had seen its fair share of different things. It had different tremolos on it. It had tons of different pickups in it. It had different knobs on it for the volume knob. It had tons of different necks on it, different headstocks. You know, the current modern day one today does have, you know, a rosewood or ebony fretboard, and then it's got almost like a spear-like headstock. So it essentially kind of looks stratish, but this part comes down to like a point, almost kind of like the chicken hawk neck from Kramer, kind of, but just imagine like this coming down more pointed. Not really sure if I explained that well, but there you go. So obviously it's seen its fair share of parts, no different than Eddie's Frankenstein. It was just put together and ripped apart and put back together again with all kinds of different parts. So, you know, when I was trying to get this thing to where I wanted it to be, you know, I had to kind of figure out what kind of era or necessarily what I wanted to go for. So again, we will touch on that far later as the reason why I did what I did, or, you know, how this became to be. Because the best guitars are guitars with stories, and this particular guitar definitely has a very cool story. Now, a little fun fact is as far as people that had also worked on this guitar, because with the headstock, you'll see different names on it throughout time. One of the main ones being ESP. Now, George Lynch had actually got endorsed by ESP. ESP is a company that's based over in Japan. We'll touch on that a little bit later as far as kind of how they started and this and that. But ESP was a brand over in Japan that endorsed him, so they had worked on the guitar a little bit, and then you'll see later models where they kind of put out their version of this by ESP, and we'll touch on that. Another person that had worked on it was Carl Sandoval, who is like a big-time guitar luthier from back in the day, and he'd actually even worked on some of Eddie's guitars as well as far as many other people. So sometimes you might see where it says Carl Sandoval, and I think there's a video out there where it actually has an ESP sticker over Carl Sandoval's name. So you know, there's very few interviews I've seen of George actually talking about this guitar, but you know, out of the interviews I've seen, he does have a very good sense of humor. So one of the things he had talked about was this little nick right here. He said was a bullet hole from the LA riots, which is a total lie. If it was a bullet hole, it would have went straight through the body, obviously, and he probably wouldn't be living in LA anymore. It scared the shit out of me. Another thing on his that you'll see again from a particular video was a black box that was on the back of the headstock, and he says that's where he gets a secret tone from, but that's actually an old box that would actually it was like one of the first versions of like a Sustainiac. So that's why that was there on the back of the headstock. Not really exactly sure how it functioned, but that's, from the research I've done, that's what it appears to be. And to this day, he still says that this is his absolute favorite guitar to play. And obviously, I mean, he had played the hell out of it because it's got tons of wear, tons of patina, relicking, blood, sweat, tears, sex, drugs, all over this thing, okay? What I wanted to talk about was, you know, how he came across, you know, ESP. So ESP stands for Electronic Sound Products. That's what ESP stands for. They originally were like a guitar parts store over in Japan. So they started in Tokyo, Japan back in 1975. So again, he built the guitar 3 years later with Charvel parts. But Tokyo, Japan, 1975 is when ESP had started, and then they actually opened up a factory in Los Angeles in 1983. So you figure that's a 5-year kind of span of where he had built this guitar, toured over in Japan, and I guess some people had kind of given him word of mouth, like, hey, go check out ESP. He goes, checks out ESP, likes him right away, gets endorsed. 83 happens, and now they're just down the street. And I think that's probably more along the times of when they really started to kind of work on this guitar and this and that. But, you know, he was in Dokken in 1981. They're touring, they're going over to Europe, this and that, Asia, wherever, and that's when they happen to come across ESP. George actually joined in 1985. So 2 years after they had opened up their factory in 83, he actually joined ESP in 1985. So 1985, that's the year that he joined ESP. And his first guitar, actually from ESP, actually wasn't this guitar with just an ESP on the headstock. It was actually a guitar known as the Kamikaze. So now, the Tiger. Okay, so ESP actually had put out a couple different renditions of the Tiger, and I had to do a little bit of research on this because I recall from memory, I actually had an ESP Tiger guitar years ago. I want to say I spent about $800 worth. You guys see, he just threw his choo-choo right in the case. ESP had put out, like I said, the Tiger. There's many differences between this one and those in particular, okay? So for those of you that care and you want to know, I can tell you kind of what's out there and what those differences are, because there are differences within those guitars, and like I said, including this one, okay? So without digressing too much, the very first guitar that you will happen to find, and the cheapest one that is available, is going to be the ESP GL 200 MT. Good God, the names that ESP comes out with their products, it's like trigonometry. Okay, so ESP puts the GL for George Lynch. Now, I'm assuming that the MT stands for Maple Tiger. I'm not 100% on that. So if you guys know in the comments, I try to find what the hell that stands for. But I'm just taking a guess there, because that guitar, okay, looks somewhat similar to this, but different, okay? So that guitar is going to have the maple neck, which is why I think it's called the MT. And then it's going to be more of like this yellow here throughout the whole guitar, okay? It's a very yellow guitar. Now, if you notice on this one, there's definitely some tinting here where you can see where it kind of goes from a darker orange, fades out to a yellow, and eventually a white, or like an off-white, okay? So that's one of the main differences between this and that, just as far as a cosmetic standpoint, including the headstock and how that's painted. That guitar was made, the GL 200 MT, was made in Indonesia. Okay, so that was the first run. In the early model too, the early model of the GL 200, because they still make some now with the GL 200 MT name, but the original ones, I wouldn't say original, but the first edition ones, I'll say, right here on the 12th fret, there was a little inlay that actually said GL 200 MT on it. And I'll show you a photo of that a little later for the next model coming up. It's pointless to show you the same photo. You'll get the gist. Body was basswood, the neck was maple, okay? There was a thin U-carve on the neck. I remember the neck being, you know, very different than what I'm usually accustomed to playing. It had a Floyd Rose floating special on it. This guitar is just dive only, but that one I remember was routed actually for a floating bridge, and it was a Floyd Rose special, and I remember it definitely sucked to stay in tune. It did not stay in tune very long, but again, to their defense, I did not get it professionally set up. That was just straight, bought it new, and it was how it was. In black hardware, they're kind of like dark nickel black, I guess, technically. The humbucker in that one was an LH150B humbucker. If I recall, that humbucker was just a really hot humbucker. It wasn't necessarily anything special, but it wasn't horrible. You know, it did what it was supposed to do. It rocked out. You weren't really trying to play clean on that thing, go play jazz. You know, it's meant for melt your face off. The back of the neck wasn't square like this one. It was kind of rounded off to where you could get here on the lower frets, which was a nice, actually, little perk to that one. And the back of the actual guitar is not striped as well. It's just straight up just yellow. Okay, so the real Tiger is actually painted front and back. Okay, that particular, the GL200 MT, is not painted on both sides. It is just, you know, straight yellow. So that's one of the main differences besides the components and the color of the neck and the size, you know, all that's different. And I want to say if on that one, I can't recall, but I believe this stripe looks kind of a little funky on those because it's either just below the volume knob or it doesn't come in direct, because the knob you can barely see on the ones where it's placed correctly. And I believe that stripe is either just a little bit lower or a little bit higher. Okay, so another thing is there's no relic version of those guitars. Okay, it's just straight up what it is. Now for the money, if that's all you can afford and that's the route that you want to go, I believe they're much cheaper now. I think you can get them used on Reverb for like, you know, maybe $400 or $500, $600 on the high end, and $600 would probably get you a brand new. But again, those are available. They're available today. You know, if you can get one and you want to upgrade those parts, you know, yourself, you know, if you're just playing at home, I'd say there's probably no need to really upgrade the parts. But, you know, if you want to go out and you want to play or you want to get as close to the, you know, the real deal as you can, then you can upgrade those parts. Like I said, those are just some of the differences, you know, between the real one and or this one or whatever else. But that's the GL200 MT. They also made another model, which we're going to get into right now. So now we're going to touch on this next one. And I just wanted to backtrack on that 200 MT, the GL200 MT. It's also ESP LTD. So I don't want to throw you guys off there because the LTD basically is just kind of like their Epiphone version, or like you know, more affordable version of their custom shop version. So we're going to touch on the next kind of step up. The next model that you'll see out there is the ESP LTD 600 MT. Now, the 600 MT was actually made in Korea. So the first one was made in Indonesia. The second one was made in Korea. And out of research that I did, which is a little fun fact, if it is a fact at all, correct me in the comments for the George Lynch lovers that I don't know. But to my knowledge, the 600 MT was actually potentially made strictly for Sam Ash guitars. And we are in our Sam Ash chair here. Rest in peace. But it was made for Sam Ash guitars strictly. There's not very many of them out there. I have seen them posted online and seen them available. But I guess it was a limited run. It's still kind of the same ordeal. It was except for the first one was a basswood body. This one was a maple body, which again is more true to what the real one is. It was a maple body. It was a maple neck. Still had the U-carve back of the neck there. Now, what the main difference was is the parts. The parts were, I'd say, were more genuine, definitely real deal parts. And the parts, you had the Seymour Duncan Screamin' Demon. Now, the Screamin' Demon that's on the real one, you'll actually still see this where it's branded with the Seymour Duncan actually on the pickup. Whereas on the 200, you're not going to see that unless someone else had changed it out. You know, as that LH150, whatever, blah, blah, blah. So you had the Screamin' Demon in there. You had an original all black Floyd Rose, Floyd Rose nut. I'm not 100% sure on what the tuners were on that one, if it was just the ESP branded tuners or not. Mine on here are the Godo tuners, but I'm not 100% sure on that, so tell me down in the comments what kind of tuners those were. Not 100% sure. Now, I do believe that guitar also came with an ESP case, whereas the 200 did not, but the 600 did. It came with an ESP case. It was still a floating bridge, I believe. It had black nickel, hardware, so it just appeared to be black, and all that was genuinely black. Again, I'm not 100%. I've never played a 600 MT. This is all just research that I had done. But it's discontinued, obviously, because they made a limited run strictly for Sam Ash, and Sam Ash ain't around no more. But it was made to rival the ESP Custom Shop, which is actually the ESP M1. But right now we're talking about the 600 MT. So cosmetically, it still looked like the all yellow, just like the 200 MT did. And it was yellow throughout. Again, the back of the guitar was not painted. The sides, a lot of these tiger stripes just happened to end. Again, there's no relic version, so the painting was wrong, so to speak. But again, for the price point, it was made to rival the M1 because it was definitely all real deal parts that the real one would have been. Like I said, just minus the cosmetics, and it still had that little neck contour there where you could get the upper frets a little bit easier with your hand. It wasn't all square here, it was more rounded off. And then also in the 12 dot inlay here, it did have that 600, the GL 600 MT inlay right here. That's another way you can tell the difference as well. But those guitars now are going anywhere from probably, I've seen them go for, a couple grand. I'd say between maybe 1,000 and 2,000. But they're super rare. I've also seen some of them, where people were able to get George Lynch to sign them, so I'm sure that obviously added some value as well. But that was a 600 MT, and that's what always confused me about the Tiger guitars. Every time I looked it up, I'm like, well, why is this one priced different, but it looks the exact same as this one? But it was just really because of the upgraded parts. Other than that, cosmetically, it's the same damn guitar. The wood was different, but other than that was the difference between the 200 and the 600, where it was made and the parts was really the main ordeal. And now we're going to go into the ESP Custom Shop one. So now we're going to touch on the ESP M1 Tiger, which is their custom shop version. So that would be top of the line, real deal as far as the ESP world is concerned. That would be the cream of the crop Tiger guitar that they happen to put out. So it was called the ESP M1 Tiger. Again, it was the custom shop version, which means it would have been made over in Japan, where that company headquarters actually is. Still maple body, maple neck. Instead of that 12th inlay where it would say, the 600 MT or the 200 MT, it was just the normal 2-dot inlay. Still maple fretboard. So again, all these fret markers, the dot inlays would have been black. Not to get confused with what I have here. Still had the Screaming Demon in it. Still had an all original Floyd Rose, or I take that back. I've seen some with an original Floyd Rose, so I don't know if those were upgraded to an original Floyd Rose or not. But from the ones I've seen, it looks like it's just a normal trim. Maybe that was custom ordered or not, because I've also seen where the M1 Tiger, where you could ring up ESP, I guess back in the day, and actually have them kind of do like a made to measure like Gibson does, where it's like, hey, I want a Tiger, but I want it to look like this, I want it to be like that, have these features. So I have seen them with the normal trim. I have seen a couple with an original Floyd. So again, don't quote me on that. I don't know if it came stock with the Floyd or if they had upgraded or vice versa with the normal trim. Either way. But like I said, throughout the years, Georgia had a bunch of different trims on this thing and a bunch of different necks. It was a parts guitar. It's been through the ringer. Still has the U-shape carve. I believe it still had the back neck contour. Over here, it still came with an ESP case. Again, the back not painted at all. It's just that yellow. The front was all yellow, still with the tiger stripe, scheme here. I'm not exactly 100% sure if the stripes are exactly how they're supposed to be. I'd say it's, pretty close, if not 100%. But like I said, a dead giveaway I've seen a lot of them is where this volume knob is in comparison to where that stripe is. They did offer, a relic version. I did see one M1 that actually had a painted back, and it's the only one I've managed to see. But again, I think in the description they said they custom ordered that years and years ago. So again, from most of the M1s I saw that were just stock, that just they put out, on assembly essentially, the backs are not painted. But that one in particular is, and it has a normal strat trim on it. Again, just food for thought on that one. And then I've also noticed that a lot of those are signed. So I don't know if ESP came out with those and George had just signed a bunch of them or this or that, but it looks like the majority of the ones I've seen posted online are all signed. So, obviously those are going to go for, currently from what I've seen about $4,000 or higher, between $4,000 and $5,000. I think $4,500 is where people are asking. Doesn't mean that's what you're going to get, because it's all based on what people are willing to pay, correct? That's the 3 models from ESP. Obviously, George has put out different guitars. He's got a Skull and Bones guitar. He's got the Skull and the Snakes. He's got his ESP LTD super worn strap with a bunch of different numbers on it, whatever that one's called. He's got some other, he's got another kind of tiger lookingness guitar, but it is not the tiger, but it is kind of almost this color. He's got another one that's got a purple outline and then kind of fades into a tiger kind of color. But there really and truly is only the one tiger with this kind of coloring and this kind of scheme. Like I said, the other ones are kind of close. I think Kramer has a tiger version. It's actually more orange and the striping's a little bit thinner. But I'd always been a fan of this one and how it looked, and it's specifically this color and definitely the painted back. I mean, that just, to me, that looks so 80s. It looks so cool. Beautiful, beautiful guitar. But again, it all just depends on, what's in your budget, what you want. And like I said, the coolest guitars are the guitars with a story. And so we're going to go ahead and we're going to touch base on that now, how I acquired this guitar. So you're probably wondering, why the hell do I have this package here? So the reason why I have this package is because, ironically, just before I had moved here, I'd got a body from Lock Customs. Again, great guitar company. I'm awaiting a neck from you guys right now for something that I'll have to update later once I get it. But I got a body from Lock Customs because I was actually originally going to paint the Tiger guitar. I was going to make an attempt on it. And I have not opened this, obviously, because I now own said guitar. So your question is, what the hell happened, Kyle? What are you going to do with this body? I don't know yet. That's why it's still in there. I'm undecided. I can't make up my mind what I want to do. But the reason why, or how I came across, oh my God, this guitar, I swear to God, I'm going to tear my rotator cuff lifting this thing. It is heavy. Again, I could compare it to 2 other guitars that are heavy as hell. See which one's my heaviest, because this is up there. I still don't know if it's my heaviest, but it's got to be close. Maybe I'll measure it in a different video if you guys really care to know. But this will definitely be a sitting down playing guitar. This would destroy my back. But I was online and I happened to come across on Instagram a posting, because I follow some of fellow YouTubers on Instagram as well. One in particular being Rob Johnson, the myth, the man, the legend, Rob Johnson. I've talked about him before in other videos. The guy's a slew full of knowledge, super kind, funny. I honestly can't believe that, there's there's still some good people in this world. He's definitely one of them. So, you know, reach out, ask him questions, give his channel a look. You know, I mean, the guy is great. He's definitely helped me, you know, as far as on a lot of my builds. I watch a lot of his videos, this and that. So, you know, again, thank you, Rob. But I saw Rob actually post, you know, this guitar. Okay. Now it looks slightly different. I won't touch on that, but he posted this guitar and he posted it online. And he said he was basically looking to sell. And, you know, at the time, I really didn't need to buy another guitar. The funds were short, but I was like, you know, crap. I'm like, I just got this body that I was going to paint. And I was like, but I got to be honest. I'm like, I don't know if mine would turn out this nice. And that's being 110%, you know, honest. I think I could get really close to this. But again, maybe I still might try it. I don't know. And then maybe sell that. Maybe, you know, I don't really like to sell guitars per se, because I've gotten in trouble for that before. But, you know, maybe that one I might be willing to get rid of, since it'd be a first attempt at that. Especially since I actually have a really great example here. But, you know, Rob Johnson had the guitar posted, and I reached out to him, and, you know, it was surreal for me because, you know, he gave me a call, and he was like, you know, ask me anything you want to know about the guitar, this and that. And, you know, we started talking Van Halen and this and that, and then we started diving into where I had watched, you know, his channel for a while, and, you know, how it kind of got me through some times in my life. And then he was letting me know, like, hey, how I'd watched your first video, you know, 12 years ago, which blew my mind. You know, I'm like, holy shit. I'm like, this guy knows I exist. I'm like, that's nuts. You know, someone in the Van Halen community that, you know, I hold in high regard, you know, knows I exist. And I was just like, that just blew my mind. And so, you know, we get to talking and this and that. And long story short, I purchased the guitar off of him. And I've seen, you know, a couple videos where maybe it was like the short reels where he was playing it and this and that. And then he also sent me some footage of him playing it. But he ships me the guitar, and the guitar, as you'll see, and I'll actually, you know, show you a video here after this about, you know, when I received it, kind of how it looked. Well, my friend, you definitely packed it well. You can see why you sent a trash bag. Yeah, you did not lie. You packed the hell out of that thing, so much appreciated, buddy. There's my dog, Halen. He's a pain in the butt. Yeah, so we are getting ready to, let's see if I can do this one-handed. I don't even know. See how talented I am. Oh, God. I may not be. We're struggling. All right, I'm gonna get this. Ooh, never mind. I made it work. Will you get out of the way? Oof. Oh, shit. Oh, shit. Oh, shit. Back up, buddy. Wow, man. That is sick. That is sick. Let me get a... Oh. Wow. Got a gloss finish, yeah. Yeah. You're right, that's... Ooh. That is a weighty sucker. You're not lying. Oh, my God. That's going to break some backs. We'll see how that is in comparison to where's it at? That sucker right there. That sucker's heavy as hell right there. Holy shit. Look, Amanda Laura, what did you do? Yeah, that is... Flip her over here. Wow, man. You got the screw holes there. Yep, the tape residue. Where you taped over it. Dude, that's killer. That's killer. Yeah, you weren't lying in person is, wow. Sweet, bro. Thank you, man. A little different. He had a white 78 pickup in here. The bridge is the same. He had a different volume knob on it. It was black, but it had numbers and this and that. The neck is the same neck that he had on it, with the exception of the headstock was just a normal plain headstock, and he had a Charvel decal on there. Aside from that, the back and the strap buttons and the neck plate, which is a Charvel, just a random Charvel neck plate, I guess he had. All of those things are the same, but the only things I really wanted to change was I wanted to make it a little bit more closer to the original. I asked him why he put the white one on there, and he said he thought it looked really cool, and it did have a vibe to it, I ain't gonna lie. But I always wanted, this to look as close to the real deal as possible. So I didn't change anything cosmetically on, the body, but obviously, I mean, look at this friggin' paint job, and we'll get a lot closer, and look at just, the detail, of the relicking, on this thing. It's just next level. And I'm like, who the hell painted this, Rob? Who in the hell did this? I said, did you do it? He said, no. He goes, Nick Amandalora did it. Now, Nick Amandalora, for the people that have been around for a while, you've heard that name probably come up, especially in the EVH community. Him, I've heard the names, Chris Hubbard. I've come across Justin Konkovich. I've come across Matt. Crap, I forgot your last name, buddy. Sorry. I'm just drawing a brain fart right now. But, there's tons of people out there that, paint and that are really good painters. And I guess Nick had done this, years ago for this body. And I was just like, holy shit. I was like, this looks immaculate, man. I'm like, that looks crazy. And he's like, I know. He's like, Nick did a really good job. And I was like, man, I was trying to save money at the time because money was tight, and I was just like, man, I really want the headstock to be painted the same as the body, just like on George's current one. So I reached out to Nick, and I said, hey, Nick, hey, man, I've just bought the Tiger off of, Rob. And he's like, oh, I remember that guitar. So that turned out great. And I was like, yes, it did. It's phenomenal. Your work is wow. I said, however, I don't know how busy you are, man, or this or that. I said, is there any way I can ship you the neck and you just paint it in the same style and scheme as this one? Because the paint job that's on here is slightly different than the one that's like on the LTD model. I'd say this one is closer to what's on kind of like the spearheaded one that has the ESP logo on there that George actually has on it now. But, fun little fact, and I don't know if I'm even supposed to say this, but, Nick has painted some headstocks for George personally, which I thought was super friggin' cool. So, the fact that, he's doing that for George, I'm like, holy shit. I'm like, I got to get him to paint this sucker, with technically without the body. Hopefully he can go off memory and, make the paint job happen. And so, I send him the neck, I wait, patiently because I know he's a busy guy. And again, super friendly, super communicative. I mean, anytime I checked in, he was like, hey man, this time, blah, 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 I'll have it done, yada, yada, yada. And so, he gets it out to me, and then I went ahead and put it all together, and then I had my guitar tech set it up the way I like, and it turned out, really, really great. It was already a banger before, but now, where it's, where it's at currently, it's still a badass guitar. It's just I really like the all black and the black chrome, and the fact that the headstock matches now. And on George's current one, he actually has the rosewood fretboard on his. So again, I would say it's definitely, it's like 99%. That's how I kind of came across it. I now built a couple of different friendships out of it, with Rob and Nick and this and that. Like I said, I mean, there's, now I've even talked with Eric Broadbent as of recent. It's just, I was on the 5150 show. Thank you again, guys, for that. Appreciate that. That was fun. So, it's definitely opened up some doors into other things and this and that. And it's a very small community when you think about it. And, I'm just happy to even be mentioned or be a part of it at all, or the fact that even any of you know who the hell I am, follow, care to watch. Again, I do these videos because I hope it really helps. What we'll do now is we'll go ahead and we'll go into, the looks of the guitar a little bit closer so you can really see it for all its glory, as opposed to me just holding it, far away and you getting to see it. So we can look over for detail. And then I'll kind of talk about if I was to do it, because this is a how-to channel, and for the majority of the part, how maybe I would go about doing it myself, for those of you that care and you're like, well, Kyle, how would you have done it if you would have done it? And again, I don't know that it would turn out this way, but we'll kind of do a short little segment on how I would do it. And real quick, before any of you ask me about this case here, this case is my favorite guitar case ever. This case is the shit. It's discontinued. It's actually made by a company known as Postal Monkey. That's the company right there, Postal Monkey. Now, they're not around anymore. Their cases kind of float around on eBay from time to time. This is an extremely rare one. I've only ever found this maybe one other time, and I got it. And, these cases probably go for anywhere between, I'd say now, probably $300 and $400. Worth every penny, man. These cases, oops, sorry, let me get off my finger. These cases are the shit. Super awesome. I mean, look at it. It's all plush. Oh, man, it gives me cold chills when I touch stuff like that. But, you can tell it's kind of like a tweed, probably like a tweed case that was, glued on here, stitched, whatever. I'm not exactly sure how they did it. But anyway, open the case, and there it is. And the cool thing about the Postal Monkey cases here, I got this is some random stuff in here, but look, you got plenty of storage. You got this little plastic tray here. You got plenty of room for stuff in here. I don't know why I got a random tool in there. This is actually a custom pickup I had Seymour Duncan made me years ago. But it's got this orange plush in here, which is nice. Again, this case did not come with this guitar, but I did, have this case for years. But I use it to store this now because, look at it, 80s. But the cool thing about Postal Monkey is it actually has a tuner in here. And this is just where the battery goes. And then you can just plug in your tuner, turn it off and on, and it tells you when you're pitch, out of pitch, and this and that. So that's another little cool factor about these cases. Well, I got a gum wrapper in here. And then here's obviously this for the neck protector. A lot of times it's over here in the center, and then you have all this pressure here on the neck later. And I like how just like literally any guitar will fit in here, and how I always like the ones how it's kind of like adjacent, where it kind of goes at an angle and it's not just straight across. Anyway, just sick case. It's got padding here. It's just great case. But enough about the case. I just wanted to hit on that because some of you are probably going to ask me, where did you get it? What is that? Like I said, I love this case. But I mean, look, he's got all the checking, done. You can tell he did this on purpose with a razor blade. He didn't necessarily put it in a freezer or anything. You do feel the checking, but still he's got a nice gloss finish on here. So, I mean, it feels natural. I mean, it does. He did a great job. Got some relicking on the wood. Again, I did change this knob out to this style knob, which is more correct for the era I was going for. Seymour Duncan Screaming Demon. We already touched on the Floyd, but this is about how it looks. And what I just love about the job that he did in the guitar, look at all my nasty fingerprints. But it's the color, how it starts out in a darker orange, and then how he kind of fades it into the yellow, and then eventually over here into the white. And I mean, it just looks, killer. Trying to get you all the angles. Of course, got the trim arm right in the phone's way. Got your white dot inlays. Changed the nut out. The nut was a It was a Floyd Rose nut, but it had like the opening down here in the back where it's like if you had the truss rod adjustment up here like you would on a Strat. So I changed it out to the R2 all black nut. Got your black retainer bar. You know, here's the paint job, you know, that he did. Trying to get it to where I'm not in the light. There we go. See, he's got the checking on there. And then for the back, and you got Grover tuners. Don't mind my cheesy decor over here on the walls. It's a slight bird's eye. Back of the neck, I don't think the actual one was bird's eye, but I can't get mad at bird's eye. I love bird's eye. I mean, just look at the detail. You can definitely tell he put a lot of love and passion, you know, into this. I mean, that's next level. I bet this is, if I could touch the custom shop, I bet this one blows it away. Blows it away. Because A, it's more accurate, but I mean, dear God, look at it. I mean, he's got all the nicks, nacks, scratches. Look, even the duct tape residue, because he had duct tape over here for a cover, cavity cover. There's duct tape, so you see all the duct tape residue. Look at all the screw holes there. I mean, again, really great. Great job, Nick. All right, so let's talk about the what if. Now, if I was to make an attempt at doing this, and again, I still may, haven't really decided yet, but if I was still choose to do a guitar, you know, a George Lynch Tiger guitar, how would I go about doing it? Well, I would definitely use nitrocellulose paints for sure, 110%. Because nitrocellulose is more, it's not as a durable paint, so it's more likely to flake, chip, and age, and quote unquote still allow the wood to breathe. So I definitely do nitrocellulose. Now, what I couldn't figure out in thinking of for a long time was exactly how the black was applied. Was it like the Frankie, where the black goes on first, then you tape off where you want the black to remain? Or was it all the color, the orange and the yellow and the white was put on, and then the black on last? Well, from the research I've done and people I've talked to as well, I think we all come into agreement that the black goes on last, because if you look right there where that wood is, you see white underneath. So that's telling me the black went on last. So obviously it's pretty intricate striping and this and that. So what I would do, first and foremost, is probably paint the thing in some off-white color, okay? I would put that all over the guitar, front and back, okay? And then what I would do is probably just tape off all the way around the edge. All the way around. Make sure I don't hit my bookshelf back there and break the neck. So, you know, tape all the way around there. That way it holds on to the white. Now you're gonna have some kind of hard color edges, probably more than likely, especially with, depending on how heavy-handed you are with paint. I'd say from here, probably distance is everything when you're applying your paint. Again, look at your wind conditions, look at your weather as well. But I'd say probably less is more in this whole aspect, and patience. Again, I'm not talking from experience, but just off of other things that I painted. This is how my approach would be, okay? So from that point, I think your easiest thing to do would probably to apply, you know, your yellow nitrocellulose paint, and I would probably go with more of like a dye than anything else. And honestly, I'd probably use like white primer for that white, because that's gonna fill in the grains of the wood, especially if if it's maple, because maple can be kind of grainy. It's not like open like ash or something. It's not an open grain wood, but even still, just to make sure, I would probably use a white primer for that. So I'd probably use a white primer. Then I would go over it with this dye of a nitrocellulose, because it's a very faint yellow. It's not going to be like the GL200 and the 600 MT, because those are just like straight, I mean like yellow. But the dye, I feel like it's probably going to be more of almost like a stain. So it's going to not be so harsh of a yellow. It's going to be more of a dull. And I think that's what's going to allow the colors to probably blend the best. And then from that point, then I would go, with an orange. So I'd probably paint the whole thing yellow, but as you get closer to the edges, I would probably just bring the spray can back as far as you can, and just kind of let the mist and the sediment kind of set on it. And then once you get it kind of to where the outlets, that way you're not going to have such as hard of a line here. And we can touch on that, how you would fix that. But then I would go over it with the orange, and I would probably start out, again, far away, but starting basically in the center of the guitar, and then just kind of raise up even further, but wider like this, to where then eventually it's going to just stay kind of in the center, as long as you kind of aim it towards the center. But I probably wouldn't go super heavy on the orange, because it's just going to become darker. It's going to look more on purpose. It's not going to blend or fade or transition as well. And then if you wanted, I wouldn't tape or cover as much, because if you do that, that's going to create even harder lines, because again, spray paint, as dust particles are going to settle, and then it's going to look like a hard line, and then you're screwed. So this is going to be like a one attempt. I would say practice on a piece of wood first and really get your technique down, because you can tell where technique is probably everything on this. And then from that point, I would then kind of do the same thing with maybe like your yellow, where again, you're just very far away and just kind of spraying only around the edge, just a little bit. Maybe, tape off maybe now halfway down here. And just again, very far away, and just get that angle just maybe 1-2 times, to where that line doesn't look necessarily as hard. Again, this is a guess. I would have to experiment with that first, but just again, if you were to ask how I do it, that's how I would do it. And then for the black, then I would go back and do probably the hardest part of the whole thing, which is where it's going to be to tape off all of the area where you don't want the black. So I would probably cover it all in tape. Just the bigger the tape, the better. And just make sure that the creases overlap each other, because that way paint doesn't get in the seam of where the tape meets. So if you put 2 pieces of tape like this next to each other, and then you spray paint, see how there's still crack, paint's still going to set into there and get on the guitar. So you want it to overlap ever so sparingly. And then when you take your X-Acto knife and you cut, and then you start to pull, you might just have to pull 2 pieces of tape, because it may not pull off with it, but that's okay. And then the black areas you can always clean up with an X-Acto knife after you peel it off, and clean up the edges where it looks like a little bit of overspray or something. Can be done. It can be fixed. I do know that also online, it looks like where they have stencils that you can buy, and where it's this stripe pattern. And I would just say, as long as the measurements are the same for the body, then you should be able to just put that on there, and then maybe put tape around it, because it'll probably be the black parts is what they'll send you, like as far as the tape. And then you can just tape around those areas, go ahead and do your cut, and then pull the stencil off, and now you got where the black can go. And then obviously I'd go real heavy on the black to make sure it all looks super covered, on your edges. And then on your back, make sure all your tiger stripes are connected, and then, obviously, before anything, make sure your neck pocket is taped off. You don't want any paint in there. We talked about that in the past, but just, shooting it out there. And then thereafter that, when you pull everything off, I would say then you would probably want to finish it with your clear coat. And I would go with the gloss, because obviously this is a glossy guitar, or even a semi-gloss, but I would go with the gloss finish. And then it's really up to you from that point whether you want to put this in a freezer and then set it outside, freezer outside, and that's going to give you the natural checking, especially if you use nitrocellulose paint, because again, it's not very durable, and it's gonna give will to the temperatures that be, and the temperature gods, and it's going to crack, going from extreme hot, cold, hot and cold, hot and cold. That's how checking happens. Or if you want to painstakingly go, as I've done before on other guitars, and go through with, you know, either a razor blade or an X-Acto knife. It's an X-Acto knife because you have more control, because it's almost like a pencil. And then you can go over, you know, every single little, you know, checking there is, and do that by hand, if you so wish. It's just a matter of how patient you want to be and how close are you trying to get. Now, again, I don't know if these are exact, but I mean, man, it plays a part and it looks super cool. And even if you look on George's, the checking is very far apart. It's not like, you know, on a Les Paul or something where you see the checking is really close. So again, if you wanted to just look natural and haphazardly, I would do the freezer and outside method to make it look as natural as possible and do less work for you. You know, and that finish is going to check. Another thing I've seen is once your clear coat cures, meaning it becomes hard and it's durable. Another thing I've seen people do is take, you know, the keyboard cleaner, the spraying cans. If you hold that upside down and you spray it on the guitar, and then you have maybe like a heat gun or like a blow dryer, because when you spray that on there, it's going to be very cold, and then that might cause it to check. And then if you put a blow dryer on like a hot setting right over there, it's going to create it to check even more. But again, it may not quite be as deep of cuts as this is, because this is on purpose. But again, it's going to turn out how it turns out. But again, that's, you know, food for thought on how you could do checking on your guitars, if that's something you would like to do. I wouldn't advise it doing it on any of your expensive ones, because you might destroy it. But again, paint something first, do it exactly how you do it, and then try those techniques, and then see, you know, before you go applying anything onto a final product. Because a lot of this stuff, it's not necessarily a one-time chance, but again, with, you know, the techniques and how you do something along those lines, you know, if you mess up once, you're gonna have to sand it, put a paint stripper on it, do it all over again. And again, if you do only learn by mistake, but I'm trying to help you guys, you know, in every way I can. So again, I might still paint a George Lynch body down the line. As of any time soon, probably not. I might turn that guitar into something else. I might use that, you know, it's that 78 pickup that Rob had, and I might put that into that and turn it into something else. But I haven't really decided. So anyway, we'll go ahead and get into some sound bites on this guitar, how it sounds, you know, with a wet, dry, wet setup, and we'll have some fun. My attempt at Mr. Scary. Well, guys, hopefully you enjoyed that. Again, appreciate you guys all watching the channel. You know, give me any feedback, any comments. You know, especially on George Lynch, Dawkins. You know, any of that pertaining to this particular video is great. Sorry, Halen just has to have my attention right now. So it is Halen time. You know, like always, thank you guys for watching. Hopefully this helped you. And until next time, do whatever it is you do. Peace.